Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to Celebrate with L.A. Williams. My name is L.A. Williams, and I am so happy and excited and honored to bring to you this very special episode. Today, we are celebrating the one and only, the legendary Miss Kathy A. Perkins. Miss Kathy, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's a beautiful day here in North Carolina.
Yes, great. I love to hear it. It's a gorgeous day in New York City, minus a few clouds. Ms. Kathy, before we get into the episode and we jump into the conversation, I want to take a couple seconds to talk about what Celebrate is and what it means to me, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good.
So this series is a manifestation of a moment I had as a very young theater student. I was in undergraduate school at Alabama State University, and I had gone over to the theater building to see a show there. First time seeing a play, knew nothing about drama, theater, any of it. And I saw a production of a play called Phaedra by Jean Racine, and it was directed by Dr. Tommy Stewart. And it was one of those experiences where I was completely bitten by the bug. I mean, while watching the play, I was like, what is this? I was breaking out into hives. It was a whole thing. But I also kept feeling like I needed to find everybody involved in that production and say thank you to them for their incredible work, for their truly life-changing work, and that was actually, when I think about it, the beginning of what is now Celebrate, this desire to say thank you and to find the people whose work has really done something really special for me. Cut to some years later, I'm living in New York City, and I truly have this sort of divine inspiration to start this interview platform where I sit down with some of those people and listen to them talk about their journeys and talk about sort of what were some of the transformative moments in their life. And that is how we got 10 years later, we're in this pandemic, we're pulling through. I mean, everything that's happening, reopening Broadway and everything else, everywhere else. And I decided I wanted to go out and see some shows this season. I wanted to go out and support the people who I consider to be on the front lines of this reopening, and I'm so glad I did, because while going out, I got to see Charles Randolph's Wright beautiful production of Trouble in Mind by Alice Childress. And I was so incredibly moved, once again, just like that experience a long time ago at ASU, where I thought, I've got to find everybody involved in this production and say thank you. I mean, it truly was one of those moments. And while sitting there watching that show twice, I remember being so completely awestruck by your gorgeous, stunning work, Miss Kathy, as a lighting designer. Oh my God. And we'll talk more about it later. But in my introduction of you, I'll say this. Your work on Trouble in Mind was so special and so illuminating. It helped me see the play, hear the play, experience the play. It was so natural and gorgeous and just real. And I felt that entire production. I felt a sense of history. I felt Alice. I heard the words, and it's because overall that entire production was beautiful. And you, as a lighting designer, lit that show. You lit that show. It was stunning, Miss Kathy. And I'm so honored to be able to say thank you and to hold space for you and listen to you talk about some of those moments in your journey. And I just want to get to know you better and all the things. So I'll say more, and we can talk about Trouble sort of later on. But I just wanted to let you know that is why I invited you here. And I'm so honored to be able to say thank you for that incredible work. Thank you for all your work. And I just am so happy to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm flattered that you saw it twice, so that says a lot.
It does. I went, and it was like within the same week. I was like, I'll be back in 2 days. It was great.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. All righty, Miss Kathy. So what you got to say? What you want to say?
No, where do you take it away? Where do you want to start?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so what I like to do with these conversations is I like to start off by celebrating the day you were born. And that question or idea is meant to have you take us back to wherever you want us to go, to however far you want us to go, and talk either about your birth story, young life growing up, where you're from, anything like that you want us to know.
Well, I was born in Mobile, Alabama. I grew up during the era of the civil rights movement, so I'm late 60s, so I don't have an issue with my age. I'm blessed to live as long as I have and continue to work. Like I said, I grew up during the era of the civil rights movement. I lived in a very tight-knit Black community, and you're talking about the 60s, so we were, Black communities were always in crisis, so that made us very, very a tight-knit community. And I was very active in church, church plays, church events. At the time I was singing and I was playing the piano. I was active in, elementary throughout school. And then I was doing theater. I was involved in a civil rights organization that had a theater component. And I think the first play I was in was The Amen Corner by James Baldwin. And I just became fascinated by his work. And so by the time I got ready to go to college, it was, it was inevitable. Yes, I'm going to do theater. And so I went to Howard University thinking I was going to be an actor, but that changed quickly. My freshman year at Howard, this is 1973. As a freshman, you have to do practicum. That means you have to do lights on a show, sets, build sets, costumes, whatever. So this particular show, ironically, it was an Alice Childress play called Wine in the Wilderness. And I had never heard of Alice Childress at that time. And so I worked on the light crew and I worked on the prop crew. So I'm backstage with a good friend of mine who was a sophomore in lighting. We're sitting backstage, and out of the blue, he says, "What are you going to do with a BFA in acting?" This is 1973. I was going to finish 3 years later. And I sort of got offended. And I said, "I'm going to Broadway when I leave here. What do you expect?" And so he laughed. He said, "There's no work for Black women on Broadway except for mammies or prostitutes or, basically nothing, or musicals, whatever." And he said, "I've seen you hang and focus lights and stuff. And, we have a touring house next door. Howard has this huge touring house next door." And he said, "There's just so much work if you work behind the scenes. You'll never be a waitress," because back then you were a waitress. Now people Uber or whatever. So he said, "Why don't you think about it and give it a try?" So after I got over my bruised ego, I said, "Sure, let me try it." And I started working at the touring house next door, which is really next door to the theater building. And then I switched my major to lighting in the theater department. And I had so much support. I was amazed at how supportive my professors were and my advisor at the touring house. And at this time, being a Black woman in lighting was not a big deal. It was not an anomaly. One, I'm at Howard University. I'm in DC, Chocolate City at the time. And we had a very strong tech program. So I was like one of 4 women in lighting. So it was nothing unusual. But when I decided to go to grad school, my professors and my advisor, they sat me down and said, "When you leave here, it's going to be a whole different world. You're going to be the only Black woman, probably the only Black person out there." And they prepared me for, going out into the professional world and grad school. So I owe so much to Howard. Like I said, my professors were amazing. I had a chance to design a lot of shows in the department before I left. And the touring house next door, God knows how many shows I did there, because this is the 70s and this was the age of funk. You're a little too young to remember that. So during that time, I must have designed lighting for anybody who was anybody. We're talking about Earth, Wind and Fire, Isaac Hayes, Patti LaBelle, Shaka Khan, all of these people. It was just an amazing experience. I learned a lot about the business end. And then I went on to grad school at University of Michigan and got my MFA. I finished there in 1978. And I worked for, my first job out of grad school was working for a choreographer named Diane McIntyre, who's still very active. She's a much older choreographer. And she had, her studio was on 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. Now, if you know New York City, that's a prime location.
Prime location,
yeah. It was just amazing. The people who came in there to take classes at her studio, we're talking about Intozaki Shange, Dawole, who's over Urban Bush Woman, and just sort of, everybody who was everybody back then. So it was just a wonderful experience working with her.
Oh my God.
So I was with her for about 6 months. We were on the road for the most part. And then after that, I ended up getting working on a show in Europe for 6 months. And then I came back to New York.
Wow.
And, I worked for a while. Well, I was teaching at Smith College. I've also taught most of my career. I've always taught, but I've always designed. So it's been a very good marriage, the academic and the professional work. So.
Miss Kathy, thank you for that very rich sort of overview. I want to tease out a couple of things from what I heard. Going back to Mobile, life growing up in Mobile. Can you talk a little bit more about two things I'm curious about? What was the sort of structure of your family inside the house? Did you have siblings? Were the only child? That kind
No,
of thing.
I was the middle child of five siblings. I had an older brother who's deceased, and I have an older sister now. She's a college professor in women's studies in California. Then there was me. Then I had another brother. He's deceased. And then I have a younger brother who's a lawyer. My parents were, that was the beauty of growing up in the South at the time. It was a segregated community, but people of all classes lived together. You know, the people next door to me, she was a high school principal. Across the street was my church, so that was the minister. Next door was Black people who owned the funeral home. They were millionaires. Down the street was another family who owned the funeral home. You know, they were very wealthy. So you had all classes. And my parents, my mother was a domestic. My father worked for the government at an aircraft company, you know, doing stock. So, but it was a government job, and you know, my parents were very, very supportive. I mean, they were not educated. You know, my father, they both had high school degrees. My father had been in the military, and he understood the importance of traveling. So he always wanted us to try and travel when we could. But again, I lived in a community where we were very encouraged. I went to segregated schools up until high school. And so the teachers that I had, you know, this was not unusual for Black schools. I had teachers, most of them had gone to HBCUs for undergrad, but they had gotten grad degrees from like Columbia University, NYU, and University of Michigan and stuff. So these were, most of my teachers were women, but these were brilliant women. And they looked after us. And they wanted us to do well, you know. And if we didn't do well, it's like, girl, I'm going to call your mama. You know better than that.
Exactly.
I know you can do more than this, you know.
Exactly.
So we looked at teachers who really cared about us learning, and they encouraged us, you know.
Absolutely. I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about Mobile, Alabama? That's a connection that you and I have.
Oh, really?
First of all, I grew up partly in Montgomery.
Okay.
And my first ever college experience was before going to ASU. I went to the University of South Alabama in Mobile.
Oh, get out of here.
I only stayed there a semester. And then I transferred back to Montgomery because I was like, this isn't working, which is a longer story. But
no, I can understand your
so I have a connection to Mobile, and I'm curious about, particularly when we talk about Alabama in the civil rights era, I don't think we talk or hear enough about Mobile. So I'm curious about if you can just say a few more things about what was happening in Mobile at the time. What was Mobile known for? Was there like something specific that was Mobile that was happening? You know, there was so much in Birmingham and Montgomery, as we all know, but I'm curious.
Right, in the civil rights movement, the focus was Montgomery, it was Selma, it was Birmingham. I would say Mobile was not as active, you know, in terms of those cities. I don't want to say that Mobile wasn't as this, you know, the racism or segregation wasn't as bad, but you know, this was a lot of the Gulf Coast cities. They had, I don't know how quite explain. I mean, it was still segregated. It was still very racist, but I don't know if people were more active in these particular cities because things were so bad. You know, the whole bus issue or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe Mobile was a little bit more conservative. They didn't, you know, make too many waves or whatever. It's like we can do things differently. But we did have very, very active organizations. Like I said, the one I was in was very active with young people. There were all sorts of protests. And I remember my my extracurriculum in high school was, okay, after school, we got to go boycott the, well, you were there. Remember, what do you call it? The Civic Auditorium, whatever the auditorium was downtown, because they weren't allowing Black people to have jobs there, you know, certain jobs that Blacks couldn't have at department stores. So, part of my weekends was, carrying signs, boycotting and picketing and stuff.
Absolutely.
So no, it was very, very active.
It was active, absolutely.
But like I said, Montgomery, because of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Birmingham, Birmingham, we were not as active. But growing up on the Gulf Coast, I really love Mobile. I just love being on the water. I just, just love that whole Gulf Coast strip is beautiful.
It is.
And people aren't aware of that. And some of the best beaches are in Alabama and Mississippi, but because it's Alabama and Mississippi,
people don't.
That's fine. We can keep our beaches clean. That's my thing. We can keep our beaches clean.
And clean they are. Absolutely, go to Florida. Clean they are. What's funny, Miss Kathy, is I'm thinking about that might be one of the main things that attracted me to USA was I went down there from Montgomery to visit school, South Alabama, and just the cleanliness and the beach feel. And I was like, oh my God, the Gulf Coast. Like, you don't think about it when you're just 2.5 hours up in Montgomery, right? Or wherever that is from. Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate that you reminding me of how beautiful that area is.
And the other thing about Mobile that most people don't know, Mardi Gras originated in Mobile, not New Orleans. So we had amazed. I mean, that was a big thing. Mardi Gras.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It still is. Absolutely. Yeah, people don't know that. Thank you for that nugget of history. Okay, moving forward a little bit in the journey, because again, you touched on so much juiciness that I want to get to. So that was sort of young childhood in the house, Mobile. When did you discover that you wanted to be in the theater? Did you mentioned, did you do plays as a kid? Like, was it something?
No, I did. It was just a natural transition. Like I said, from church, early on, we did the little Easter pageant, 3 years old, your Easter speech and all this stuff. So, it was just something I just did without thinking. In elementary school, we did plays and, whatever. And then in the community. And so when I went to high school and stuff,
it just carried on.
Yeah.
Miss Kathy,
think about it.
I'm so fascinated by that. And I think this is why I'm always interested in asking questions about it. How do people just get into the performing arts? Because for me, I discovered it at Alabama State University. Again, when I saw the play Phaedra, I'd never known anything about theater. So I was wondering, how do people just end up? Like, is there a pamphlet that your mom is like, okay, I'm gonna put you in this program? How does it become such a natural thing for someone?
Well, also, like I said, I had teachers in school, and they encouraged me. Because I remember when I was in the 5th grade, one of my teachers, she went through all 20-some students, stand up. I think you need to be a doctor when you grow up. And I remember her pointing to me, she says, you need to be an actress when you grow up. And so I think that must have stuck.
Yeah.
And so when I started thinking about going to college, I didn't really know where to go, but people kept saying, oh, this is the best school to go to. Well, first of all, I knew I didn't want to go to school in Alabama. I said, I want to get out. I don't want to go to school with everybody I've gone to school with, because everybody's going either to, Tuskegee or, Alabama State, or going down the deal. I said, let me go someplace where I don't have to run into my, my friends. So I need to meet new people.
That's right.
And someone said, you need to go to Howard. They have like the best theater program. That's where you want to go. And so and my father always wanted one of his children to go to Howard. So I was like, oh, fine, I'm good.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's good. That's very clear to me. It makes me want to just stop and celebrate teachers.
Yes.
Teachers and community, which I think we sometimes overlook, and we don't think about the impact of a teacher just being like, you gonna be this and you should be that.
Yeah.
Right. And how that sticks with us. And also it makes me want to stop and celebrate, your parents and your family and those people who allowed you to explore those passions and, put you in the church play. Because that's the thing that I'm always trying to get at, right? It's like, what does it take for people to see something in young children, young people, and sort of help cultivate that, right? And that's the thing that I'm always fascinated by, and I love it. And so I think that's the answer to my question. Great. So then you get to Howard. You've already touched on it. I love that you work so much in this. Can you say more about this center that was next door to Howard, where shows and stuff were happening?
If anybody's been to Howard campus, we have this amazing facility. Well, it was very amazing at the time. I guess it still is. Called Crampton Auditorium.
That's right. Okay.
And it was like a really showcase theater. Again, we're talking about 73, I don't know how old it had been, but it was like a major showcase
Yeah.
in DC as a theater. And
Mm,
like I said, during the 70s, all the big groups came there.
mm,
And the students, we were highly trained,
Talk
as
about it.
lighting and sound people. So
Hmm.
people knew if they came there and brought their performances, the quality of the lighting and the sound was going to be good.
Mm, mm,
And so it was just a wonderful experience. You know, I, I didn't know a whole lot about jazz growing
mm,
up.
mm,
So I got to work with all sorts of jazz artists, Herbie Hancock, Gil
mm,
Scott Heron, people I just knew nothing about.
mm,
And then dance companies were coming through, and there was the Jamaican National Dance Company that came
mm.
through. And so I connected with someone from there. And years later, I went down to Jamaica. So it was just, they just brought in everything. And then
Yeah.
Homecoming was a big event.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, homecoming at HBCUs, what they're
Is a
like.
whole thing.
So it was just
Absolutely.
a wonderful experience. And so when I
Wow.
left there, I felt, I knew I was ready for grad school.
Yeah.
Normally I tell my students, don't go straight to grad school out of undergrad. You need to
Mhm.
take some time off, experience, and see if this is what you want to do.
That's right.
But by the time I left undergrad, I knew this is what I want to do, because I'd had so
Mhm.
much professional experience before I left there.
I can totally relate to that so much from my experience at Alabama State. I did so many things as a stage manager and even a director that by the time I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I
Right.
worked so much. And I thank you for shouting out Crampton Auditorium, because I think it's absolutely still there. I also taught at Howard for a little bit, so I know a
Oh,
little bit
okay.
about the fine arts program there. It was a while ago. And I also know about Crampton Auditorium. I swear I'm moving away from Mobile after I ask this one last question.
Okay.
Was there a lot of theater or the performing arts in Mobile at the time of growing up? And was there a show that you saw before leaving to go to Howard where you thought, oh my God, this feels, did that experience happen? Was there even theater happening in Mobile?
Yeah, there was theater, but theater was still very segregated. I mean, when I went to a
Mm.
white school,
Mm.
I don't even remember the plays. They were so boring. I can't remember. Uh, I really don't remember, but I remember being in something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, Mainly the plays that I work with this community group. Like I said, I was blown away by the works of James Baldwin, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody in the organization knew him. And
Mm.
so he was going to come down and visit. I don't know, something happened, but I remember we were reading a lot of his works,
Mm.
and I was just fascinated by
Mm.
all of his short stories, some of his poetry and stuff. And I got to meet him years later, or maybe,
Mm.
yeah, it may have been 10 years later.
Mm.
So I met him like around 1984, 1985.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember going up to him and I said, I know you don't know me from Adam, but when I was in high school, I did your Amen Corner, and I want to thank you for that
Mm.
opportunity, because it really
Mm.
opened my eyes and stuff. And he was
Mm.
so gracious. He said, I'm so
Mm.
glad you liked it. And, but I would say that would be the only thing, that
Totally.
somehow
Absolutely.
working on that show, um,
I
and
mean, that's a big
church in
thing.
a different way,
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
the play.
I do know the play. I do know. I read it a long time ago. I haven't seen it, but I read it a long time ago, and it's a stunning play. And I mean, what a wonderful sort of entry into theater, if you will. I mean, what a play, what an artist. And also, I can't stop thinking about the fact that you got to meet James Baldwin. And I feel just like I would have, really had a sort of, I would have been very happy.
And
So
growing up, the theater that I did, and it still resonates with me even
mm,
today, you know, it has to say something. I mean, somehow that's
mhm,
what I was taught.
mhm,
If I
mhm.
walk out of the theater after seeing a show and I feel the same way leaving out as I did coming in, something's something's not right.
Something's not happening, right? Yeah.
So, and for me, I've always told my students or whoever, you know, some people say, well, what makes a good play to you? I say, if I can leave the theater and if I can care about the characters on the stage.
Mm,
But if I walk out of the theater, it's like I don't care about them,
mm, mm.
the show didn't work for me. So
It
I
didn't work for
really
you.
have to care about all these people.
Absolutely. I love that. Another thing I want to shout out or celebrate, something you've been touching on, which is the kind of rich experiences that we have been able to have at HBCUs. I think I don't know what people think, but as a person who started off at a PWI and then ended up in HBCU, I know for a fact I would not be here having this conversation with you had it not been for my time and experience at Alabama State University. And a lot of that is because, again, I wasn't just able to do shows in the theater building. We were doing shows out in Montgomery at the Joel Reed Acadome. I was doing coronations, convocations.
I mean, doing museums. And I know, Dr. Stewart, you studied with the best, because I think
that's right.
Were you all going to the museums, doing
absolutely. We were doing all kinds of audio work, working on TV shows and films and things. So I say that to say, I love that you talk about, again, teachers and your experience at Howard, and how much you were able to accomplish because we worked so hard. And, a part of it at ASU was at least that we only had 5 faculty members and 120 students, right? So as students, we had to work to make the department run. But anyway, I'm just really grateful for all of that. And it sounds like you got a lot of that too. When you were at Howard and you were doing all these amazing things, I'm curious to know who was pointing you to these opportunities happening at the auditorium. Like, was it friends, hearsay, or were you going over and just?
It became a job. It was a job. It eventually became.
Oh, I see. So you were employed by the auditorium.
I was employed by them.
Oh, okay.
So I had to work all this around school.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Most of the events were on the weekend. Rarely did they have something during the week, unless it was like a speaker or something, but all the big shows were weekends. And so unless I was designing something in the department, I was next door.
And still earning your degree at the same time.
Oh, yeah. And so what happened my senior year, I was smart enough. I took an overload of classes my junior year because I was asked to be, at the time, the term was called crew chief. That meant you were in charge of the whole technical staff. And that was a big deal to say I was the crew chief. So, I determined who comes in backstage doing shows and, lighting, I was in charge of the lighting, everything. If I wanted to light the concert, I could do that, or I could pass it on to one of my other classmates on the crew. But I knew I wanted to spend more time in Crampton my senior year. So like I said, I took an overload of classes my junior year. So I had very few classes my senior year.
Yeah.
My professors understood that. So by the last semester, I really spent a lot of time in the theater.
Wow. Oh, that's so incredible. How soon after Howard and DC did you go to grad school? And what was grad school? Right away, of course, right?
Exactly. I knew, I mean, what was so wonderful about the year of graduation, and this is always, I always tell my students, it's like, you never know who's watching you.
That's right.
My last semester, Roberta Flack, I don't know if you know her as a singer.
Of course, absolutely.
She did a concert. She was there for like 2 days. And she was also an alum of Howard. So she came there. I had a chance to light her. It was wonderful. And about maybe 2 months later, I get this call, says, my name is James Lucas. You probably don't remember me. I was Roberta Flack's road manager when we came through. And every year I do this Smithsonian, they have what's called the Folk Life Festival. It happens in the summer. They bring in groups from different countries. They perform on the mall and they tour. He said, Roberta Flack is doing an international tour this coming summer, and I can't do the Folk Life Festival. So I need somebody to replace me. And they need someone who knows how to do lighting and who can stage manage and who can help coordinate people. And he says, I want to recommend you. And I was flat. It's like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And he says, yes, you can. I saw you work. And there was a nice, affirmation of what I could do. And, he believed in me more than I believed in myself. So that summer, this is like 1976. This is the centennial, like 200th anniversary of event. And it was a huge event. So I was with a group that came from Jamaica. Because it's called Folk Life, they brought in, grassroots performers from different countries. And so that was a wonderful experience. I mean, a professional experience. So by the time I got to grad school, I was ready. I mean, I had a lot of practical experience. My weakness was we didn't do a lot of theory in terms of lighting. I didn't spend a lot of time drafting. So I had to make up for drafting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Talk about it, right? Isn't that a thing?
That was
Yeah.
But I had all the practical experience. You know, I could just run circles around my other classmates when it came to going into a theater, getting a show up and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where I excelled.
Absolutely. I love that, Miss Kathy. You are speaking. You are speaking. I was going to ask you what was being in grad school like, but you've already touched on it. I mean, you know, what was the sort of big difference?
I mean, I was told what to expect, and it was, and it was what to, you know, it was what I expected. You know, I will never forget my first day. My advisor, and he swears he has no recollection of this because I would see him at, you know, theater conferences, USITT. So he calls me into his office, and you know, they gave me this nickname called Perky, which I hated. And he says, Perky, I just want you to know that we've only had a few women in the MFA program. They tend to leave the first semester, and we've never had any Black people. And it's like, okay, well, what's your point? It's like, oh, no. I just wanted you to know, you know, I just wanted you to know. And he does not remember that conversation. But, you know, my classmates were, you know, they were good. You know, I enjoyed my classmates. You know, they would make these stupid off the cuff comments, not knowing that they were very racist. And I would have to call it. He's like, you know, Perky, what are you going to do when you get out of school? Do you think anybody will give you a job? They were always wondering about who's going to hire me.
Who's going to hire you? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so weird. I ended up getting an application from one of them for a job that I worked at in LA. But anyway, so they were always concerned about, do you think you'll get a job? Will anybody hire you? And, you know.
That's interesting. Did you share those concerns at all? Or were you not on that page?
You know, about if I was going to get a job?
Yeah, like were you at all at that time as a grad student, a young Black woman in lighting design, were you concerned about your career after grad school and whether or not there would be opportunities?
No, because I had enough connection. One of the nice things about being in Howard, we had all these connections with, you know, this was also the tail end of the Black theater movement. Yes. So I knew I would have an opportunity to work with the New Federal Theater, the Negro Ensemble Company, you know, maybe not necessarily, I mean, my goal was not Broadway at the time. But I did apply for, you know, jobs with white companies. Of course, no one responded. But when I left, no, I wasn't worried about getting a job. I knew something for me in New York, or even I was always told you can come back to DC and work. So I wasn't really worried.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm always thinking about that inner confidence, that instinctive confidence that we have, and that inner knowing that we have. And I'm curious if that would you say was a part of why you weren't worried? I mean, yes, you had all the outer validations, right? Of like people like you, we got you, you're gonna be good. But I wonder if there was something inside you that felt, I am on the right track. I'm good. I'm gonna have everything I need.
Yeah, you know, I was given that confidence, like I said, at Howard, and other people contacted me to work. I mean, there were many days that I started to drop out of school because, you know, one group said, oh, we need you to work with you. And I have to laugh because the Funkadelics, I had never heard of them. They came in, George Clinton, they were wearing diapers. This was the Mothership Connection. And at the end of their tour, the road manager came up and said, we'd love for you to go on the road with us. We're going to do a big national tour. And I said, oh my God, I'd have to drop out of school. Well, that's okay. This is George Clinton and the Funkadelics. And I told my sister, she said, you better finish your degree.
Exactly.
So a lot of these places would say, well, if you think about it, you know, give us a call later. You know, we'd still love to have you on the road.
Yeah.
And during this time, you didn't have the big audio visual companies.
Yeah.
You know, the individual artists would call who they wanted. Now you got to go with these big companies for everything.
That's right.
So no, there were artists. There was an artist by the name of Noel Pointer who was a violinist. Bless his soul. He died young. because he said, oh, when you get out of school, I do tours, I would love to have you work with me. So there were all of these options.
Yeah. Let's celebrate options, and let's also celebrate what sounds like a lot of folks who saw you, believed in you, and had your back.
Yeah.
And not just had your back, but let you know that, so that you could move through your journey with a certain amount of confidence and certainty, which is so important. And we should never skip over, right? Because I think, there's the opposite situation where it can easily be, focused on what we don't have and what we might not be able to do, and people making you feel like there won't be opportunities. And I just love that you had the opposite experience. So after grad school, what happens after Michigan? Do you go to New York? Do you go back to DC?
No, I go to Michigan. I finished. What was interesting about Michigan back during that time, one, there were very few MFA programs in design. And so Michigan was one of the few schools that they called it a 2-year program, which I loved. I mean, you still did 6 semesters, but you went all year round. It's like summers, you're here. You don't get to go away. And I had to think
That's
about
right.
that. And I say, let me do it. I want to get in and get out.
Get out. Yes.
So I finished my program in August. 2 weeks later, I'm in New York working with Diane McIntyre. And I got that job through a friend. And I always tell people it's always about connection.
That's right. That's right.
A friend who had gone to school with me was working, she was in management, in Diane McIntyre's office. And there's a lighting designer, another Black lighting designer who's been on Broadway named Alan Lee Hughes. And Alan Lee Hughes was working for Diane McIntyre. My friend called and said, oh my God, Alan Lee Hughes had to, he took a job with a really big dance company. He couldn't turn it down. And so Diane doesn't have anybody and she's trying to find another lighting person. And I mentioned you and I told all about you. And she said, if she can be here in 2 weeks, let's just do it. And so I went there and I had a wonderful experience working with Diane McIntyre. But what happened, and I believe in fate, this is what's supposed to happen. At the end of at Christmas time, because I started with her in August, Christmas, I went to Howard to visit some friends, and they were rehearsing a show that was going to Europe. They were going to take a version of Raisin. I don't know if you know Raisin. Raisin is the musical.
Musical, yeah.
And so there was this guy from Switzerland who wanted to bring a Black cast over to produce Raisin in Switzerland. And so at the same time, there was another play going over called Owen Song by a guy named Owen Dotson. And a friend of mine was lighting that show. He was going to light Owen Song and he was going to be the assistant lighting designer on Raisin in Switzerland. So both shows were going to Switzerland. So I went to Howard. I was watching rehearsals and everything. I said, oh, this is really interesting and blah, blah, blah. So I get back to New York. I go into the office. Diane McIntyre had left me a note because she just didn't have the heart to tell me to my face. She says, the grant that pays your salary did not come through. So I can't keep you on with pay. If you want to stay on for free, it's like, what? You can stay. And it's like, what? And it's like, I don't have a job. And so I go home all depressed. There's this voice on my answering machine saying, hey, this is Marvin, give me a call. I call Marvin back. Marvin is the guy who's lighting the show going to Switzerland. He said, look, there's this new TV show starting called Entertainment Tonight or Entertainment Today or whatever. I think it still comes on. And he said, I just got a full-time job, working with them doing lights. And he says, I can't turn this down. This is Hollywood. You saw the rehearsal. Can you do the show? I don't want to tell them no until I have a replacement. I say, yeah, I'm sure I can do it. I said, when do they leave? He said, they leave in 2 weeks. It's like, what? Didn't have a passport. And this is why I always tell my students, be ready. Always have a passport.
Yes.
So back in those days, it was easy. I could just drive them down to DC and go in and get a passport in one day. I said, I got to get a passport. Anyway, so I end up going to Switzerland doing these shows. And it was an amazing experience. We were based in Switzerland, but we went to Austria, Liechtenstein, which I'd never heard of. We went to Germany. So it was just, so I was there for about 5 months.
Wow.
And then I came back from Europe, and I worked in DC. I worked at the New Federal Theater. I worked at NEC. I worked with the theater called Richard Allen Cultural Center. I don't know if they're still around, but anyway, I was freelancing a lot. And this is all the summer of '79. And then I just remember going home that summer to see my parents. I had like a couple of days free. And my father was a wonderful man. We were sitting on the front porch, and he looked at me and he said, "Now tell me who you work for, because I have a hard time telling my friends where you work." I said, "Daddy, I don't work for anybody. I freelance." He says, "You got to explain, break that down for me. I don't know what that means." I said, "Well, I work for this theater company 1 month, and then maybe the next month I get a job at another theater company." And I said, "It's called freelancing." And he says, "I really don't like that term. It sounds like a loose woman freelancing." He had me cracking up. He says, "I can't tell people my daughter's freelancing." He said, "That doesn't sound good." And then he said, "Well, can you put this freelancing stuff aside for a couple of years and just go get a real job?" For him, a real job was teaching.
That's right.
You needed to know where your paycheck was coming every month. You had health insurance. So he said, "Can you just go find a teaching job for a couple of years?" And so I said, "Yeah, let me go do that." And but I said, "I got to find a teaching job that will allow me to continue designing." I was not ready to teach. It's like, I'm 25. I really don't want to go into a classroom.
That's right. Yeah.
And so my sister, who was in academia at the time, she was excited. She said, "Yeah, you should get yourself a teaching job," and blah, blah, blah. So as fate would have it, like I said, things just tend to fall in place. I had gone to Smith College, which is an elite women's college up in Massachusetts. I had gone there one semester because they had a wonderful facilities and stuff. But anyway, to make a long story short, my sister calls me and says, "Oh, Smith is looking for a lighting person." And then at the bottom of the job announcement, it says, "Women and minorities apply." And she said, "I think that's your job." And so I did apply. I got interviewed. The people who had taught me remembered me. I mean, it hadn't been that many years ago. I was there in '75. This is '79. They all remembered me. They were very excited. I think what excited them was, "Oh, this Black woman has an MFA." Because at the time, I was the only Black woman with the MFA in lighting. And then I had worked in Europe. I had worked in New York. It's like, oh my God, she's done so much. But I was third on the list, so I didn't get the job. In a way, I was happy because I could say, "Oh, I applied for these jobs. They didn't happen.
They didn't have me."
But wait a minute. But 2 weeks before classes started at Smith, I get this call from the chair. And she says, "Kathy, I know this is very awkward for both of us." She said, "You knew you were our third choice." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Our first choice got a big opera in Germany, which she could not turn down. Our second choice discovered she's pregnant. And she does not want to start her first job with the first child." And I said, "When do you need me there?" So I ended up going to teach there. And it was a great 6 years. And what was nice about Smith, it was 3 hours from New York. So I was able to freelance in New York, not so much doing plays, but I did a lot of concerts. That's when I was working with Noel Pointer and doing some shows. And I did some I did dance stuff too, because dance was easy to do over a weekend. And then I assisted a friend on a Nina Simone concert. So that was a big thrill for me. Because she suddenly made an appearance in New York, and they said, "Oh, Nina Simone's coming to town and I need an assistant. Can you come and help?" And I said, "Sure." So I was doing those kinds of things. And then during my holidays, like Christmas, I would do shows with, the NEC or the New Federal Theater. And I would take my students. So I've always been a big advocate of, because I had wonderful mentoring. So I wanted to do the same thing for my students.
I love that. Oh,
come down and work with me on shows.
I love that, Miss Kathy. Oh, I love that. Ooh, thank you for that.
I know I'm rambling.
No, you are not rambling at all. You are giving me all the history and the juice and the juicy stuff, and I really appreciate it. Especially learning how you got into teaching, which leads me to be able to say to you, thank you for your work as an educator. Thank you for your work as an educator. I think everything you just said is an example of why we need more artists, people who are actually working in the field, but also in the classrooms, because of that mentorship, because of that access that it creates, and the connections, and the, so thank you for all your work as an educator. It's not lost on me that as much as you are a lighting designer, as we've heard you talk about, you are also, a person who has spent a lot of years mentoring students and teaching and all the things. So thank you again for that. Let's talk a little bit about Trouble in Mind.
Yes.
I know we touched on it. Again, there is no question here for real. It's so much, it's me holding space for you and me saying thank you, Miss Kathy, for that work. That work was absolutely stunning. The entire production was. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for that. I especially am grateful for that final moment in the production. That I thought was quite astonishing from a lighting standpoint, and everything else. LaShawn's was incredible. Charles Randolph Wright's, direction, that cast, everything was absolutely splendid. Arnolfo's set, the design, the costumes, everything. But I just wanted to make sure I carve out a moment to say thank you again for your outstanding work. And I got a chance to meet you. And I think Alan Lee Hughes on the same night, Miss Kathy.
Wait, who were you with?
I was with Patricia McGregor, my director friend Patricia McGregor, and we came as Charles guests.
Right.
And I think
with her and us. Yeah.
That's right. Yes. And we all took a picture together. And I just felt I was like, oh my God, I'm meeting Miss Kathy Perkins and Alan Lee Hughes. And yeah, we had a great time. So.
Okay.
That's right. Because it was cold. So
it was very cold. Yeah,
it was very cold.
Like, why do I know this guy? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So again, just thank you for your outstanding work on it.
Thank you.
Gorgeous work. In the spirit of lightheartedness and fun, and wanting to get to know you a little bit better, what are some of Miss Kathy's favorite things? What are some of the things that you enjoy? Favorite food, favorite city, favorite song, anything? Just.
I love to travel, and that was what was so difficult during the pandemic. One, because I also have an underlying health issue, so I was really paranoid about going out. But the beauty of the internet and Zoom, during the pandemic, I was able to compile a collection of plays by Women International around the theme of home. And so I traveled vicariously. So I was in different places. I had writers from Brazil, a writer from Brazil, Haiti, Lebanon, India, the UK, US. And so, so it was just great. But I love to travel. Whenever I can get out, I try and travel.
I love that.
And I'm hoping to start back traveling soon, other than just work.
Work travel, yeah.
But traveling is something I really enjoy. And I enjoy just meeting people from different cultures.
I love that.
And also, that's also part of the work I do. Like I've done several anthologies, on African women, about African women, but they were written by men and women. So, but I love traveling anywhere, and I want to start back doing that.
I love that. Thank you for your work as a theater historian too. I don't know if I've mentioned that, and all the hours and energy you've put into these anthologies that you just talked about. Thank you, Miss Kathy. It's so needed and so appreciated. Really it is. So thank you for that. Yeah. I'm glad I get a chance to say that to you. Yeah. I'd like to wrap these conversations up with 3 questions, Miss Kathy. The first one being, what does it mean to you to be celebrated?
It's an honor to me. A lot of times people, it's really weird. The other day I got an email from this young woman who teaches at Bucknell, and you just never know how you impact people, because she had contacted me because she needed to get in touch with the Childress estate because she wants to do an article. And she says, oh, well, thank you for responding so quickly. I used 3 of your books, and I teach a course on African-American women theater. And I want to thank you. And you're the reason why I publish. And she's a South Asian woman. She says, I want to do a book collection of plays by American South Asian women, because she said we're a group that's ignored. And so I was really touched by that, and I need to respond to her email. But one of the things I want to say, I know I rambled on, and this is, you have limited time.
I don't. No.
Oh, going back to Trouble in Mind, I've always told people, if I never do another Broadway show in my life, I am so content, because I did Childress. And this was, doing this play was beyond a dream. I can't even, I knew I'd worked with Charles about 14 years ago, and he always talked about, we've got to get Alice on Broadway. We've got to get Alice on Broadway. And it was like, okay, good luck, Charles. But he was so determined. And then every time I would see him, not that we stayed in touch a lot, we'd run into each other at events, and every time I would see him, he would say, we got to get this, we got to get Alice to Broadway. And then, I'm doing a little PR. I did a collection of plays of Alice's work.
Yes.
And I knew her, and that is what made this show so special to me.
Yes.
So my first play at Howard is an Alice Childress piece in 1984. And I had an opportunity to light a new musical she wrote called Gullah. It was not at a big theater. It was at, University of Massachusetts. It was like a workshop. But, my friend who ran the small company, she says, I don't have no money, but we're bringing Alice Childress to campus. She's going to workshop one of her new pieces called Gullah. It's going to be with students, so it's not a professional show. I said, but it's Alice Childress. And so during that time, I got to meet her. It was such a wonderful time. And we became friends up until we met in 84. She died in 94. And I just regret that she didn't have a chance to, I didn't get to finish the anthology before she died. It was years later, like 10 years later after she died, that I did the book.
Wow.
But before she died, she had talked about never seeing Broadway. She says, no one is going to take my shows to Broadway at this point. Because she was feeling neglected. And we're talking about the 90s. And at this time, everybody was doing shows with one character. You had Anna Devere Smith, playing 20 people in a one-woman show. At the Colored Museum with 4 or 5 people. And Childress says, I got to have a lot of people on stage, and no one's producing plays with a lot of people. So, just the fact that this show ended up going to Broadway, and that, I was able to do it. This is a show she had been trying to get to Broadway since 1955.
Yes.
And, 30 some odd years later, I get, well, no, that's more than that. Almost 60 years, 60.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, 60 something. Yeah.
That I would be doing this show at the read about this history for years. But anyway, so I was so thankful for that. We were thankful to Charles, and the spirit of Childress was with us throughout the whole show. Because you're a theater person, you always work on a show. There's always somebody who's going to spoil something.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
But everybody, it was just such a cohesive group, and everybody was so excited. And, like I said, the spirit of Childress was there with us the whole time. Because we were like one of the few Broadway shows where we didn't have to cancel a performance.
That's right.
We didn't have anybody get COVID. And
that's right.
Made it to the end.
Oh God, I didn't know those little bits right there, that y'all hadn't had to shut down and no one got COVID. Wow.
Yeah.
What a blessed experience.
We said it must have been Alice. She
was like, we're going to do this and we're going to do it. And it's so funny, Miss Kathy, because I really and truly I never had a chance to meet Alice, but I definitely could feel a spirit. I felt the spirit. I could feel her so much in the words and in the acting and the design and the production. So I believe you. And I've had a chance to speak with Mr. Charles about all of this, and he said the same thing. So I was there. I experienced something. I can attest to. There was a feeling in that building, both times. That was absolutely special. That couldn't have been no one else but, Miss Alice. So
and it was such a joy to work on the show. And I love, Charles's idea. And one of the things he said from the beginning, which I so appreciate, he said, I don't want this to look like your typical Broadway show. We're not into the flash and all of this, except for at the end. And I appreciated that, because I said Alice was very much into realism.
That's right. That's right.
And, people would leave and say, well, I didn't really notice a lot of light changes. I said, that's good.
That's a good thing.
So subtle. It's like it was about the word.
It was about the word.
Yeah. So it was not.
And to me, that's what I was saying at the beginning of this conversation. That to me, what you just said is elegance. And why I say it was so natural and felt very real, and also really earned, I think, the gorgeous moment at the end. Miss Kathy, I can go on and on and on about that production. I'm telling you, I enjoyed it so much. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So then the second question I like to ask is, what or who do you celebrate?
Oh God. So I tend to celebrate those who came before me, because a lot of my research is on, the previous playwrights, the designers, and I'm also celebrating a lot of young people. Right now, thanks to George Floyd, and I always tell people, a lot of this would not be happening with without George Floyd. I'm hoping that this isn't a moment. I'm hoping to see 6 or 7 more Black Broadway shows for the 2023 season.
That's
I
correct.
don't know.
Yes.
I mean, there's some coming up, but it's still part of this season.
That's right.
Right now, Black designers are working like crazy. So I'm celebrating a lot of the young designers.
I love that. I love that.
That's important, because they need, like I said, I was mentored. They need mentoring too.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of this is happening so fast for them.
That's right. Whoa. That's a deep point, and so juicy. And the final question I like to ask my guests is, what do you do to celebrate you? Not
enough.
Come on now, talk about it.
I'm trying to slow down. I'm trying to deal with what do you call self-care. And so I said I want to, because there's so many young designers out there now, I'm at the point where I can pass on work to other people.
Absolutely.
I want to begin to spend more time writing. I want to, I've got 3 articles that I need to write. One, I want to write about the experience working on Broadway with the Alice Childress piece. And I want to write more about Black designers. And,
yes.
Yeah. So I want to spend more time doing these things. But just be very selective in what I design. I would love to do more Alice Childress plays. There's a production of Wedding Band that's opening this month at the theater for a new audience. Yeah. Go check it out.
Yeah.
I was asked to design it, but it just didn't work out schedule-wise. But I would love to. I like to do new works. I like to do new works and classic works by Black writers. So so that's So I'm being more selective in what I design. So I want to do more traveling.
Yeah. I love that. I love
traveling.
Miss Kathy, I am so honored to be able to share this space with you today. I've enjoyed listening to you.
This is great.
I've really enjoyed listening to you talk about your incredible journey and blessed journey. And I'm just so grateful for you and all of your scholarly research and your mentorship and your work as an educator, and especially your work as a designer. And I'm just so glad that I got to say this to you and all the things, and congratulations on everything. We love you. I think I speak for so many people when I say we loved that production. We love everything you do. We appreciate you, and we've got you and all the things.
Thank you. And congratulations in all that you're doing. And you're young, you got a long ways to go. So I'll be seeing more of you and more about what you're doing.
Yes, ma'am. And we're going to keep the Alabama connection going.
That's right. That's a real connection going. We got to.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Miss Kathy, thank you. I love you, sister. Take care, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.